The November wind rattled the windows of my colonial-style house in Arlington Heights as I adjusted the thermostat to 72 degrees. At 63, I'd learned that comfort mattered more than the electric bill, especially when hosting what was supposed to be a peaceful family dinner. The kitchen smelled of roasted turkey and sage stuffing, my grandmother's recipe that had been passed down through 3 generations of women who knew how to hold a family together through sheer force of will. And perfectly seasoned gravy. I'm Margaret Sullivan, and if you'd told me 6 months ago that I'd be standing in my kitchen, hands trembling as I stirred cranberry sauce, preparing to confront my daughter-in-law about attempting to poison me, I would have recommended you seek professional help. But here I was, watching steam rise from the serving dishes while my heart hammered against my ribs like a caged bird, desperate for freedom. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe so you won't miss a thing, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The dining room table gleamed under the soft glow of the chandelier my late husband Patrick had surprised me with on our 20th anniversary. Fine china that rarely saw daylight sat pristinely arranged for 6 people: myself, my son Michael, his wife Jessica, their 8-year-old daughter Emma, and Jessica's parents, Harold and Linda Morrison. What should have been a routine Thanksgiving gathering had become something else entirely. A carefully orchestrated performance where I was both director and unwilling star. Michael arrived first, as he always did, 20 minutes early, with his perpetual need to help. At 35, he still possessed that earnest quality that had made him the kid who brought home injured birds and stray cats. His dark hair had begun to thin at the crown, and worry lines had appeared around his green eyes, Patrick's eyes, but he remained my steadfast boy, even when his loyalty was divided. "Mom, you didn't have to go to all this trouble," he said, kissing my cheek while surveying the feast spread across the kitchen counters. "We could have ordered from that new place on Northwest Highway. Your father would roll over in his grave if I served takeout for Thanksgiving," I replied, though we both knew Patrick had been gone for 3 years now. Some habits of speech die harder than the people they reference. Jessica arrived precisely at 4, because punctuality was apparently one of her many virtues, at least according to her. She swept through my front door like she owned the place, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the wind, her burgundy dress immaculate and expensive. At 29, she possessed the kind of calculated beauty that required significant maintenance. Weekly salon appointments, monthly facials, and a personal trainer whose services cost more than my grocery budget. "Margaret, you look tired," she said, offering one of those air kisses that never quite made contact. "Are you feeling well? You know, at your age, hosting can be quite taxing." I bit back my first 3 responses, each progressively less charitable than the last. "I'm perfectly fine, dear, just the usual pre-dinner excitement." Emma bounded in behind her mother, a whirlwind of 8-year-old energy, dressed in a navy blue dress with white tights that would be dirty within the hour. She was the one pure joy in this complicated family equation, bright, funny, and blissfully unaware of the adult tensions that crackled like electricity through every family gathering. "Grandma Maggie, I helped Mom make the green bean casserole," she announced, throwing her arms around my waist with the fierce affection that only grandchildren possess. "Did you now?" I hugged her back, inhaling the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Well, I can't wait to taste it." Jessica's parents arrived 20 minutes late, which was early for them. Harold Morrison was a soft-spoken man who'd spent 40 years selling insurance and had developed the peculiar ability to fade into wallpaper when conversations grew uncomfortable. Linda, however, was Jessica's mother in every sense that mattered, sharp-tongued, beautifully maintained, and utterly convinced that her daughter had married beneath her station when she chose my Michael. Linda's auburn hair was freshly highlighted, her makeup applied with professional precision, and her black cocktail dress probably cost more than my mortgage payment. She surveyed my dining room with the critical eye of someone perpetually disappointed by other people's efforts. "Margaret, what a lovely table," she said in that tone that made compliments sound like barely concealed criticism. So traditional. We gathered around the table as the last daylight faded behind the lace curtains my mother had made 50 years ago. I'd placed Jessica directly across from me, where I could watch every expression, every gesture, every carefully calculated move. She sat with perfect posture, her manicured hands folded in her lap, the picture of suburban respectability. Michael carved the turkey with the same methodical care he brought to his accounting practice, while Emma chattered about her school play and Harold nodded politely at everything. Linda dominated the conversation with updates about their recent cruise to Alaska, their new kitchen renovation, and their neighbor's divorce, delivered with the breathless excitement of someone who thrived on other people's drama. "Pass the stuffing, would you, Margaret?" Jessica asked sweetly, her blue eyes meeting mine across the table. I handed her the ceramic bowl, our fingers. Brushing briefly, hers were cold despite the warm house, and I noticed the slight tremor in her grip. Nervousness, perhaps, or anticipation. The first course proceeded normally enough. Emma regaled us with a detailed account of her friend's pet hamster's escape and subsequent capture, while Harold praised my turkey with the enthusiasm of a man grateful to eat someone else's cooking. Linda critiqued the wine, a bottle I'd spent considerable thought selecting, and suggested that next time I might try something with more body and less sentiment. It was during the main course that Jessica made her move. "Margaret, you seem tense tonight," she said, reaching across the table to pat my hand with false concern. "I brought something that might help you relax." She produced a small pill bottle from her purse, the kind that usually held prescription medication. The label was partially peeled off, but I could make out fragments. "For anxiety, as needed, may cause drowsiness. It's perfectly natural," Jessica continued, shaking one small white pill into her palm. "My doctor prescribed it for stress. Just pop it in your wine and you'll feel so much better." The table fell silent, except for the soft clink of Emma's fork against her plate. Michael looked confused, his brow furrowed in that way that meant he was processing something he didn't quite understand. Harold studied his mashed potatoes with intense concentration, while Linda watched the exchange with sharp interest. "That's very thoughtful, dear," I said carefully, "but I don't take medication that isn't prescribed to me." "Oh, don't be silly," Jessica laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "It's completely harmless. Dr. Peterson gives them to all his patients. One little pill won't hurt anything." She held the tablet between her thumb and forefinger, suspended over my wine glass like a small white threat. The overhead light caught its surface, making it seem to glow with malevolent purpose. "Jessica," Michael said slowly, "I don't think Mom needs—" "Michael, please," his wife interrupted, her voice gaining an edge. "Your mother is clearly stressed. Look at her hands. They're shaking. She's probably not sleeping well. This will help." I glanced down at my hands, steady as rocks around my wine glass. "I'm sleeping just fine, thank you." "Margaret, really?" Linda chimed in, her voice carrying that particular authority she wielded like a weapon. "Jessica is only trying to help. You do seem rather agitated tonight." The conspiracy was breathtaking in its casual cruelty. Mother and daughter united in their determination to drug me into compliance. I could see it all unfolding. Margaret, the overwrought widow, becoming increasingly erratic at family gatherings until something had to be done for her own good. Perhaps a nice facility where she could be properly supervised, leaving her house and her assets in more responsible hands. "I appreciate everyone's concern for my well-being," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet dining room, "but I won't be taking any pills tonight." Jessica's smile never wavered, but her eyes went flat and cold. "Of course, Margaret. It was just a suggestion." She palmed the pill and returned it to the bottle with practiced efficiency, but not before I caught the flash of genuine anger that crossed her features. Emma, blessedly oblivious to the undercurrents, asked if she could have more cranberry sauce. The rest of dinner passed in a fog of stilted conversation and forced pleasantries. Jessica made several more attempts to convince me that I looked tired, stressed, unwell, each suggestion delivered with syrupy concern, while her mother nodded in agreement. Michael grew increasingly uncomfortable, his loyalty torn between his wife and his growing certainty that something was very wrong. When we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, Jessica positioned herself near my chair with the dedication of a hunting cat. Every time I reached for my cup, her hand would hover nearby, ready to steady me if I seemed unsteady. Every time I spoke, she would study my words for signs of confusion or distress. "Mom, are you sure you're feeling all right?" Michael asked privately when Jessica stepped away to check on Emma. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just tired." But I wasn't fine. I was terrified and angry in equal measure, watching my daughter-in-law circle like a predator while her mother provided covering fire. This wasn't the first time Jessica had made comments about my age, my competence, my ability to manage my own affairs. But tonight, she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. As the evening wound down and coats were retrieved, Jessica made one final attempt. "Margaret, I'm worried about you living alone in this big house," she said, her voice pitched perfectly for concerned family member. "Maybe it's time to consider other arrangements, somewhere with people around to help if you need it." "I'm perfectly capable of managing my own home," I replied, but I could see the seed being planted in Michael's mind. His wife was right to be concerned about his aging mother. Perhaps they should be more involved in her decisions. After they left, I stood in my dining room surrounded by dirty dishes and the lingering scent of turkey and betrayal. My hands shook now, not from age or infirmity, but from rage so pure it threatened to consume me whole. Jessica had tried to drug me, in my own home, at my own table, in front of my son and granddaughter. She'd attempted to slip me an unknown substance while positioning herself as the caring daughter-in-law, worried about her mother-in-law's declining mental state. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. I'd survived 63 years, buried a husband, raised a son, and managed to keep body and soul together through recessions, family crises, and the countless small betrayals that life delivers with regularity. I was not some doddering old woman ripe for manipulation, and now, standing among the wreckage of what should have been a peaceful family dinner, I began to plan. If Jessica Morrison Sullivan wanted to play games with an old woman's mind, she was about to learn that this old woman had been playing those games longer than she'd been alive. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I retrieved the wine glass Jessica had targeted for her little pill and held it up to the light, examining it for any residue or sign that she'd succeeded in her mission while I wasn't looking. Clean. She'd been thwarted this time, but there would be others. This wasn't impulse, this was strategy. The thought that chilled me most wasn't Jessica's attempt at drugging me. It was the casual way Linda had supported her daughter's actions, as if slipping pills to unwilling family members was perfectly acceptable behavior. This wasn't a desperate daughter-in-law acting alone. This was a coordinated effort by two women who decided I was an obstacle to be removed. While they were about to discover that this obstacle could bite back, I began clearing the table with methodical precision, each plate and glass carrying the weight of revelation. Tomorrow, I would start making calls, I would start asking questions, and I would start building a case that would reveal Jessica Morrison Sullivan for exactly what she was. But tonight, I would plan. Because if there's one thing you learn from surviving 6 decades in this world, it's that the best revenge is served with patience, preparation, and perfect timing. As I loaded the dishwasher, I found myself almost looking forward to the coming battle. Jessica thought she was hunting a helpless old woman, but she was about to discover she'd cornered a lioness instead. The game was afoot, and I intended to win. The next morning brought the kind of crisp, clear November day that made Chicago winters seem almost tolerable. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee that could wake the dead and a legal pad covered in notes, watching squirrels raid the bird feeder outside my window while I planned my daughter-in-law's downfall. Sleep had been elusive. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jessica's manicured fingers hovering over my wine glass, that small white pill poised to drop like a depth charge into my evening. The casual cruelty of it, the way she'd smiled while attempting to drug me, had replayed in my mind until dawn. But morning brought clarity, and clarity brought purpose. I started with the pill bottle. Jessica had been careful to remove most of the label, but prescription bottles leave traces. I called my neighbor Dorothy Chen, who worked as a pharmacy technician at Walgreens. If anyone could help me identify what Jessica had tried to slip me, it would be her. "Margaret, honey, what do you need?" Dorothy's voice was warm with the familiarity of 20 years of borrowed sugar and shared gossip. "This might sound strange, but if I brought you a prescription bottle with a partial label, could you tell me what was originally prescribed?" There was a pause. Then the sound of Dorothy settling into professional mode. "Depends on how much of the label is intact. National drug code numbers are standardized. If I can see even part of one, I might be able to track it." "Why?" "Are you cleaning out Patrick's old medications?" "Something like that. I'll be over around noon if that works." "Course it does. I'm curious now." My next call was to my lawyer, Robert Martinez, who'd handled Patrick's estate and had been gently suggesting I update my will for the past 2 years. Time to take him up on that offer. "Robert, it's Margaret Sullivan. I think it's time we had that conversation about my estate planning." "Margaret, wonderful to hear from you. What's brought this on? Nothing's wrong, I hope." "Let's just say I've had some recent insights about family dynamics. Could you fit me in this week? And Robert, I'd prefer to keep this confidential for now." "Of course. Wednesday at 2 work for you?" With appointments scheduled, I turned my attention to research. If Jessica was trying to have me declared incompetent, she would need evidence of declining mental capacity. That meant she'd been building a case, probably for months. I started with my own records. Bank statements, medical files, insurance papers, anything that could be twisted to suggest I was becoming incapable of managing my affairs. Everything looked normal, which was both reassuring and concerning. If Jessica was playing a longer game, she might be more dangerous than I'd initially thought. Around 10:30, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Jessica standing on my front porch, looking like a concerned daughter-in-law making a wellness check. She wore designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her blonde hair artfully tousled in that way that took an hour to achieve. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "Jessica, this is unexpected." "Margaret, I was so worried about you after last night." Her blue eyes were wide with manufactured concern. "You seemed so agitated during dinner." "I barely slept, thinking about you here all alone." "I'm perfectly fine, dear. Just tired from hosting." "Are you sure? Because honestly, you seemed quite confused, forgetting things, losing track of the conversation. Michael's worried too." There it was, the groundwork being laid. Jessica was establishing a pattern, creating witnesses to my supposed decline. I wondered how many other people she'd shared her concerns with, how many casual conversations had planted seeds about poor Margaret Sullivan's failing mind. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm really quite well." "Was there something specific you needed?" Jessica's smile faltered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Actually, I was hoping we could talk about last night and, well, about the future." "The future? Margaret, you're not getting any younger. This house is so big, so isolating. Have you thought about what happens if something goes wrong? What if you fall or have a medical emergency or—" "I have a medical alert system, Jessica, and neighbors who check on me regularly. But it's not the same as having family nearby. Michael and I have been talking, and we think it might be time to consider assisted living. Nothing dramatic, just a nice place where there are people around, activities, medical care if needed." The audacity was breathtaking. Less than 18 hours after trying to drug me, she was suggesting I needed institutional care for my own safety. That's very thoughtful, but I'm quite content here. Margaret, I know this is difficult to hear, but sometimes family has to make hard decisions for everyone's well-being. Everyone's well-being? Well, yes. Emma needs stability, and if something happens to you, it affects all of us. We'd feel terrible if we hadn't tried to help when we could. I studied her face, noting the practiced sincerity, the calculated vulnerability. This wasn't concern, it was manipulation, delivered with surgical precision. I'll certainly think about what you've said, I replied carefully, but for now I'm managing just fine. Jessica's mask slipped again, just slightly. A flash of irritation crossed her features before being replaced by that syrupy concern. Of course, but Margaret, if you ever feel overwhelmed or confused or like you need help making decisions, please call me. Promise? I promise I'll call someone if I need help. After she left, I stood in my hallway feeling like I'd just survived an interrogation. Jessica hadn't come to check on my well-being. She'd come to assess my mental state, to gauge whether last night's failed drugging had achieved any lasting effects. I called Michael immediately. Hi, Mom. Jessica said she was going to stop by and check on you. She did. Michael, has she been talking to you about my mental state? There was a pause. She's mentioned that you seem a little scattered lately, more forgetful. She's worried about you living alone. Scattered how? Can you give me specific examples? Another pause, longer this time. Well, last month when we came for dinner, you forgot you'd invited us, and you seemed confused about what day it was. Jessica said you called her Margaret 3 times instead of Jessica. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. The dinner invitation confusion had been legitimate. I'd mixed up dates in my calendar, but calling Jessica by the wrong name. I had no memory of that happening, and I was usually meticulous about names. Michael, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about your answer. Have you personally witnessed me being confused or forgetful, or are these observations coming from Jessica? The silence stretched long enough that I had my answer. Mum, what are you getting at? I'm getting at the fact that last night your wife tried to slip me a pill without my consent, and today she's suggesting I need institutional care. Don't you find that concerning? Mom, she was trying to help. You did seem stressed. Michael, listen to me very carefully. I was not stressed, confused, or forgetful last night. I was alert and completely aware of what was happening. Your wife attempted to drug me, and when I refused, she began laying groundwork to have me declared incompetent. Mom, that's a very serious accusation. Yes, it is, and I'm making it based on what I observed with my own eyes. I could hear him struggling with the implications. On one hand, his mother making wild accusations about his wife. On the other, the growing certainty that something wasn't right with the pattern of reports he'd been receiving. Can we talk about this in person? Soon? Yes, but Michael, don't discuss this conversation with Jessica. Not yet. After we hung up, I drove to Dorothy's house, carrying the pill bottle Jessica had produced at dinner. Dorothy lived in a tidy ranch house 3 blocks away, surrounded by flower gardens that made the rest of the neighborhood look shabby by comparison. Let me see what you've got, she said, leading me to her kitchen table, where she'd laid out a magnifying glass and reference guides. I handed her the bottle, watching her examine it with professional thoroughness. Partial NDC number here. And this fragment looks like lorazepam. Margaret, this was Ativan, anti-anxiety medication, pretty strong stuff. What would it do if someone slipped it into a drink? Dorothy looked up sharply. Honey, what kind of trouble are you in? I told her everything. The dinner, Jessica's behavior, the morning's visit. Dorothy listened with growing concern, her expression shifting from curiosity to alarm. Margaret, Ativan in an alcoholic drink could be very dangerous, especially for someone your age. It could cause severe sedation, confusion, loss of coordination. If someone gave you enough, you could appear mentally incompetent for hours, or even dangerous to yourself. Absolutely. and could fall, have trouble breathing, become completely disoriented. If someone didn't know you'd been drugged, they might think you were having a medical emergency or mental breakdown. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. Jessica hadn't been trying to help me relax. She'd been attempting to create evidence of my mental instability. One successful drugging episode witnessed by the right people could provide all the ammunition she needed to begin competency proceedings. Dorothy, I need a favor. Could you document what you found? Maybe write up something official about the medication and its effects? Of course. And Margaret, you need to be very careful. If someone's trying to make you look incompetent, they're probably not done trying. That afternoon, I met with Robert Martinez in his downtown office. The view from his 20th floor conference room stretched across the Chicago River to the lake beyond, but I barely noticed the scenery. My focus was entirely on protecting myself from my own family. Margaret, what you're describing is extremely serious, Robert said, after I'd laid out the situation. If Jessica is attempting to have you declared incompetent, we need to get ahead of this immediately. What are my options? Several. First, we'll update your will and estate planning documents to include specific provisions about competency challenges. Second, I'll recommend a full neurological and psychiatric evaluation to establish baseline cognitive function. Third, we might consider a restraining order if the harassment continues. And if she succeeds, if she convinces people I'm not mentally competent, Robert's expression grew grave. Then she could petition for guardianship, potentially gain control of your assets, and make medical decisions on your behalf. In extreme cases, she could have you institutionalized against your will. The thought sent ice through my veins. Jessica wasn't just trying to embarrass me or make family gatherings uncomfortable. She was attempting to steal my entire life. There's something else, Robert continued. If she's trying to establish incompetency, she's probably building a case systematically. You should document everything, conversations, incidents, attempts at manipulation. Keep a detailed record with dates and witnesses. I left Robert's office with a thick folder of legal documents and a clear understanding of the stakes. This wasn't just about family, drama anymore. This was about my freedom, my autonomy, and my right to live my life on my own terms. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with a new notebook, documenting everything I could remember about Jessica's behavior over the past 6 months. Late phone calls to check on me after I'd supposedly seemed confused. Conversations with Michael about my forgetfulness. Comments to Emma about Grandma being tired and needy. The pattern was clear once I looked for it. Jessica had been laying groundwork for months, creating a narrative of decline that would justify dramatic intervention when the time was right. Last night's drugging attempt would have been the crescendo, a public episode of confusion and disorientation that confirmed everyone's worst fears about my mental state. But she'd failed, and now she was scrambling. The morning visit had been reconnaissance, an attempt to assess whether I was onto her game. My refusal to be cooperative, probably, convinced her that more aggressive measures were necessary. I was still writing when my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the caller ID. "Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation today, and I want to believe you, but what you're suggesting about Jessica, it's so extreme. Why would she want to hurt you?" I set down my pen and chose my words carefully. "Michael, how much do you know about my financial situation? I know Dad left you comfortable. The house is paid off. You have his pension, some investments. It's more than that. Your father was very good with money, and I've been careful. When I die, my estate will be worth approximately $1.2 million. The silence was long and telling. "Mom, I had no idea. Jessica did. She asked very pointed questions about my finances last Christmas, remember? She seemed quite interested in my investment portfolio and life insurance policies." Another silence. Then a heavy sigh. "What do you want me to do? I want you to watch. Pay attention to what she says about me, how she describes my behavior, who she talks to about my mental state. Don't confront her. Just observe. And if I see what you're talking about, Then we'll figure out how to protect both of us, because Michael, if she succeeds in having me declared incompetent, your inheritance disappears too. Everything goes into a trust controlled by my guardian. Jesus, Mom, I never thought. Neither did I until last night. But sweetheart, I need you to understand something. This isn't about me being a paranoid old woman. This is about someone trying to steal our family's future, and I won't let that happen. After we hung up, I returned to my notebook, adding details and dates until my hand cramped. Outside, the November wind rattled my windows again, but this time it sounded less like threat and more like challenge. Jessica Morrison. Sullivan thought she was playing chess with a doddering old woman. She was about to discover that this old woman had been playing chess since before she was born, and I had no intention of being checkmated in my own home. Tomorrow, I would begin building my counterattack. Tonight, I would plan every move with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of a hunter. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of bitter November cold that Chicago specializes in, the kind that cuts through winter coats and reminds you that lake effect weather doesn't care about your plans. I sat in Dr. Patricia Hendricks' office, undergoing the most thorough mental evaluation of my life, while somewhere across town, Jessica was probably making more concerned phone calls about my deteriorating condition. Dr. Hendricks was Robert Martinez's recommendation, a neuropsychologist who specialized in competency evaluations and elder abuse cases. She was younger than I expected, perhaps 40, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Margaret, you're testing in the 95th percentile for cognitive function in your age group, she said, reviewing the results of 3 hours of memory tests, logic puzzles, and psychological evaluations. Your recall is excellent, your reasoning skills are sharp, and you show no signs of dementia, depression, or any other condition that would impair your judgment. What about stress-related confusion? Could someone mistake normal stress responses for mental decline? Certainly, especially if they were motivated to do so. Dr. Hendricks leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. Margaret, are you concerned that someone is trying to have you declared incompetent? I told her about Jessica, about the dinner party, about the pattern of manufactured concerns. She listened without interruption, taking notes in a leather portfolio. What you're describing is unfortunately not uncommon, she said when I finished. Financial elder abuse often begins with attempts to establish cognitive decline. The perpetrator creates incidents, documents confusion, and builds a case that the victim can't manage their own affairs. How do I protect myself? First, this evaluation provides baseline documentation of your mental competence. Second, I'm going to recommend ongoing monitoring, monthly check-ins to ensure any changes in your cognitive status are properly documented by a neutral party. Third, you need to be very careful about any medications or substances anyone offers you. She handed me a thick folder. This contains your complete evaluation, copies of all test results, and my professional opinion that you are mentally competent and capable of managing your own affairs. Keep this safe and make sure your attorney has copies. From Dr. Hendricks' office, I drove to meet Detective Sarah Walsh at a coffee shop in downtown Arlington Heights. Robert Martinez had connected me with Walsh, who worked financial crimes and had seen numerous elder abuse cases. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that had seen too much human cruelty for her age. Mrs. Sullivan, attempted drugging is assault, Walsh said, after reviewing Dorothy Chen's documentation of the Ativan bottle. Even if it was just anti-anxiety medication, giving someone drugs without their consent is a felony, but proving it happened is another matter entirely. Exactly. Unless we catch her in the act or find evidence of planning, it's your word against hers. Walsh stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Tell me about her background. What do you know about Jessica's history? Not much, honestly. She and Michael met 3 years ago at some professional networking event. She was working in marketing for a pharmaceutical company. They married quickly, maybe too quickly. Pharmaceutical company? Walsh's eyebrows rose. That's interesting. Someone with access to medications and knowledge about their effects. I never thought about that connection. What about her relationship with her mother? You mentioned they seemed to be working together. Linda Morrison, she's formidable, comes from money, used to getting her way. She never approved of Michael, thought Jessica was marrying beneath her standards. Walsh made notes on her phone. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm going to be blunt with you. What you're describing sounds like a sophisticated operation. 2 women with experience manipulating people, working together to gain control of significant assets. This isn't amateur hour. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, the holiday decorations too cheerful for the darkness of our conversation. What would you do if you were in my position? Document everything. Install security cameras if you can. And whatever you do, don't eat or drink anything they provide. If they succeed in drugging you once, they'll keep trying until they get the reaction they want. You think they'll escalate? Walsh's expression was grim. Mrs. Sullivan, you've cost them their first opportunity, and you're obviously onto their game. People like this don't just give up and go away. They double down. I left the coffee shop feeling like I was preparing for war, which I supposed I was. Jessica had fired the first shot at Thanksgiving dinner, but she'd missed her target. Now it was my turn. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Michael texting, "Mom, Jessica wants to have you over for dinner Friday night. She's worried about you eating properly. Should I tell her yes?" I stared at the message, feeling that familiar chill of recognition. Less than a week after her first attempt, Jessica was already maneuvering for another opportunity. The concerned daughter-in-law, worried about her mother-in-law's nutrition, was perfect cover for another drugging attempt. I texted back, "That's sweet, but I have plans Friday. Maybe another time." His response came immediately. "She's really concerned, Mom. Says you've been refusing help and isolating yourself. Could you try to be flexible?" There it was, the manipulation in real time. Jessica was telling Michael that I was becoming difficult, refusing assistance, exhibiting the kind of stubborn behavior that elderly people display when their judgment starts failing. Instead of responding to Michael's text, I called him, "Sweetheart, we need to talk, in person, and soon." "Is this about dinner Friday?" "Mom, Jessica's just trying to help." "Michael, I need you to do something for me. I need you to really listen to how Jessica talks about me, the words she uses, the concerns she raises. Can you do that?" "I guess, but no buts. Just listen. And Michael, don't tell her I asked you to do this." "Mom, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared, because if I'm right about what's happening, we're all in trouble." That evening I installed a security system. Nothing elaborate, just a doorbell camera and a few motion-activated cameras around the main floor of my house. If Jessica tried to visit when I wasn't home, or if she attempted to plant evidence or stage an incident, I wanted it recorded. The installation technician was a chatty young man named Kevin who couldn't understand why a woman my age needed surveillance equipment. "Most of our customers are younger folks worried about package theft," he said, adjusting the angle on the living room camera. "You having trouble with break-ins out here?" "Something like that," I replied, not wanting to explain that I was more worried about the people with keys than strangers. Thursday brought an unexpected development. Linda Morrison called, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "Margaret, dear, I've been so worried since Thanksgiving. You seemed quite overwrought during dinner." "I was perfectly fine, Linda. Just tired from cooking." "Oh, but darling, Jessica and I both noticed how confused you seemed, forgetting names, losing track of conversations. It must be so frightening for you." The gaslighting was masterful, presenting their concerns as established fact while expressing sympathy for my condition. Linda Morrison had probably spent decades perfecting this particular technique. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm managing quite well." "Are you, though?" "Margaret, I hope you won't take this wrong, but Jessica's mentioned that you've been having some episodes, calling her by different names, forgetting appointments, seeming disoriented. Have you considered seeing a doctor? I see my doctor regularly, Linda. He's quite satisfied with my health. Well, of course, but sometimes these things are subtle. Early dementia can be so hard to recognize. The person experiencing it is often the last to know. There was something almost gleeful in her voice, as if she enjoyed delivering this particular piece of psychological warfare. Linda Morrison was clearly the architect of this campaign, with Jessica Asher eager student and primary operative. Linda, I'm curious about something. How exactly has Jessica been documenting these supposed episodes? Does she keep notes about my behavior? The question caught her off guard. There was a brief pause before she recovered her composure. Well, naturally, she's concerned about family. We all notice when someone we love starts declining. That's interesting, because I've been keeping my own notes, and my observations don't match yours at all. Another pause, longer this time. When Linda spoke again, her voice had lost some of its saccharine quality. Margaret, denial is very common in these situations. Perhaps it would be helpful if we all sat down together, you, Michael, Jessica, and myself, to discuss our concerns. An intervention, you mean? I prefer to think of it as a family meeting. Just people who love you, sharing their observations. The trap was beautifully laid, 4 against 1, with Michael caught in the middle and likely to side with his wife. They'd present their evidence of my declining mental state, probably with specific examples and dates. I'd be portrayed as the confused elderly woman in denial about her condition, while they were the loving family members forced to stage an intervention for my own good. That's very thoughtful, Linda. Let me think about it and get back to you. Of course, dear, but don't wait too long. These situations tend to deteriorate rapidly if left unaddressed. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling the walls closing in. They were accelerating their timeline, probably because my refusal to cooperate was making them nervous. The family intervention would be their next major move, a coordinated assault on my credibility designed to convince Michael that his mother needed immediate help. I called Robert Martinez immediately. Robert, they're planning some kind of family intervention, trying to get me in a room where they can present evidence of my supposed mental decline. Margaret, under no circumstances should you agree to that meeting. It's a setup. They'll record it, document your responses, and use anything you say or do as evidence of incompetency. What if I don't have a choice? What if Michael insists? Then you insist on having your attorney present. But honestly, I'd recommend avoiding it entirely. How? Go away for a while. Visit family out of state. Take a vacation, anything that removes you from their immediate sphere of influence, while we build your legal protections. The idea had merit. My sister Catherine lived in Phoenix and had been asking me to visit for months. A few weeks in Arizona would give me distance from Jessica's machinations while allowing Robert to prepare countermeasures. But first, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. Friday morning brought a surprise visit from Michael. He stood on my doorstep looking haggard and confused, holding a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold hours ago. "Mom, can we talk?" I led him to the kitchen, noting the way his hands shook as he set down his cup. Whatever conversation he'd had with Jessica about the canceled dinner had clearly been intense. "Michael, you look terrible. What's wrong?" "It's Jessica. God, Mom, I think you might be right about her." My heart did a complicated dance between vindication and terror. If Michael was seeing through Jessica's facade, it meant I was winning. It also meant Jessica was about to become desperate. "Tell me what happened." "Last night, after you canceled dinner, she went ballistic. Not at first. At first, she was all concerned about you isolating yourself and refusing help. But then she started talking about how stubborn you were being, how difficult it was to manage someone in denial about their condition." "Manage?" That's what she said. Manage. Like you were some kind of problem to be solved, instead of a person making your own choices. Michael ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he was trying to process something too big for his understanding. Then she started talking about timelines, how we couldn't wait much longer, how your condition would only get worse, how we needed to act while you were still cooperative enough to be reasoned with. Act how? She mentioned looking into assisted living facilities, said she'd already made some calls, gotten information about places with memory care units. The ice in my veins was becoming familiar. Jessica had been planning my institutionalization while pretending to help with family dinners. Michael, there's something you need to see. I showed him Dr. Hendrick's evaluation, explaining about the cognitive testing and the professional opinion that I was mentally competent. I showed him Dorothy's analysis of the Ativan bottle. I explained about Detective Walsh and the legal protections Robert was putting in place. He listened in silence, his expression shifting from confusion to horror to anger. She tried to drug you? My wife tried to drug my mother. And when that didn't work, she started planning other ways to achieve the same result. Jesus Christ, Mom. How long has this been going on? Months, probably. The groundwork, anyway. Building a case that I was declining mentally, establishing a pattern that would justify intervention. Michael stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. What about Emma? If Jessica's capable of this, what else might she do? The question I'd been dreading. Emma was an innocent in all of this, a child who loved her grandmother and trusted her mother completely. If Jessica felt cornered, would she use her own daughter as leverage? I don't know, I admitted. But Michael, you need to be very careful how you handle this. If Jessica realizes you're onto her, she might do something dramatic. Like what? Like claim I'm having a psychotic episode and need emergency psychiatric intervention. Or stage an incident where I seem dangerous to myself or others. Or use Emma's safety as justification for keeping me away from the family. Michael sank back into his chair, looking older than his 35 years. What do I do? For now, nothing. Act normal. Don't confront Jessica. Don't let her know that you suspect anything. I'm going to visit Aunt Catherine for a few weeks while Robert builds our legal case. You're leaving? I'm removing myself from Jessica's immediate reach while we figure out how to stop her permanently. Mom, what if she tries something while you're gone? What if she tells people you've disappeared, that you're wandering around confused somewhere? It was a valid concern. An elderly woman suddenly leaving town without telling her family could be spun as evidence of confusion or early dementia. That's why you're going to know where I am at all times. You're going to call me daily, and you're going to document that I'm lucid and capable. You'll be my witness that this is a planned vacation, not a confused disappearance. Michael nodded slowly, then looked at me with something approaching awe. Mum, I owe you an apology. When Jessica first started making comments about your behavior, I should have questioned it more. I should have trusted my own observations instead of hers. You trusted your wife. That's what you were supposed to do. But she was lying about everything, about you, about her concerns, about her motivations. How long has she been planning this? I think since she learned about my finances, maybe since she met you, if she researched your family situation beforehand. The thought hung between us like poison gas. Had Jessica married Michael for love, or had she targeted him because he was the only child of a financially comfortable widow? The romantic story of their whirlwind courtship suddenly looked much darker. There's something else, Michael said quietly. Her mother called last night after you and I talked. She wanted to know what you'd said, whether you'd seemed confused or paranoid. She seemed really interested in your exact words. They're coordinating. This isn't Jessica acting alone. This is a partnership between mother and daughter. But why? What do they get out of this? I pulled out my financial records, showing Michael the full scope of what Jessica was after. The house, the investments, the life insurance, Patrick's pension benefits, everything that represented security and independence in my old age. If they succeed in having me declared incompetent, a court-appointed guardian controls all of this. If that guardian happens to be my concerned daughter-in-law, she gets everything, not immediately, but she controls it, manages it, makes decisions about how it's spent, and when I die, she's positioned to claim that she's been managing my affairs for years, that she deserves compensation for her care and oversight. Michael studied the numbers with his accountant's eye, and I watched comprehension dawn. Mum, this isn't just fraud. This is theft on a massive scale. Yes, and they almost pulled it off. What happens now? Now we fight back, but carefully, methodically, with legal backup and professional documentation. We don't get emotional, we don't get careless, and we don't give them any ammunition to use against us. Michael stood up, his expression hardening into something I'd never seen before. My gentle son, who brought home injured animals and cried at Disney movies, looked capable of violence. I want them stopped, Mom, both of them. I want them to pay for what they tried to do to you. They will, but Michael, promise me something. Don't underestimate them. Jessica is smart, manipulative, and desperate. Linda is experienced at this kind of psychological warfare. They won't go down without a fight. What kind of fight? The kind where they try to destroy your credibility too. If they can't get to me directly, they'll work on isolating me from my support system. That means they'll try to convince people that you're either helping me cover up my mental decline or that you're taking advantage of your confused mother. Michael's face went pale. They'd do that? They tried to drug me at my own dinner table. Yes, they'd do that. Jesus. So be careful. Document everything. Trust no one with information about our plans. And remember that everything you say to Jessica goes straight to Linda. After Michael left, I sat in my living room surrounded by legal documents and security camera monitors, feeling like a general preparing for siege warfare. Outside, November was settling into December, bare trees reaching toward a gray sky that promised snow. Jessica and Linda Morrison had made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated their target. They saw a lonely widow, vulnerable and isolated, an easy mark for their sophisticated con game. They hadn't counted on facing someone who'd survived 6 decades in a world that rarely rewarded naive women. But I'd learned something important from our confrontation. Jessica wasn't just greedy, she was desperate. People desperate enough to drug elderly family members don't stop at the first failure. They escalate, which meant this war was far from over. I pulled out my phone and called Catherine in Phoenix. Kathy, it's Margaret. I know this is short notice, but could I come visit for a few weeks? Of course. What's wrong? You sound stressed. I'll explain when I get there, but Kathy, if anyone calls asking about me, anyone at all, don't give them information. Tell them to call me directly. Margaret, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared, because if I'm wrong about what's happening here, I'm a paranoid old woman. And if I'm right, I'm fighting for my life. 3 days later, I was on a plane to Phoenix, leaving behind security cameras, legal documents, and a daughter-in-law who was about to discover that her intended victim had vanished just when she'd been planning the final move. The counterattack was underway. Now it was time to see how Jessica Morrison Sullivan handled being outmaneuvered by the confused old woman she'd tried to destroy. The Arizona sun was a revelation after Chicago's gray November, but even warmth and blue skies couldn't completely ease the tension that had taken up permanent residence in my chest. I sat on Catherine's patio in Scottsdale, watching hummingbirds battle over the feeder, while my phone rang with increasingly frantic calls from Jessica. I'd been in Phoenix for 6 days, and according to Michael's reports, Jessica was not handling my absence well. She's telling everyone you've disappeared, he said during our daily check-in call. She called your doctor, your neighbors, even tried to file a missing person report. What did the police say? They told her that adults have the right to travel without notifying their daughter-in-law. But Mom, she's really ramping up the crazy. Yesterday, she showed up at your house with Emma, crying about how worried she was about Grandma. Poor Emma. She must be terrified. That's the thing. Emma wasn't upset at all. When Jessica started crying about you being missing, Emma said, "But Mom, Grandma's visiting Aunt Catherine. You said so yourself yesterday." I felt a grim satisfaction. Jessica was so focused on manipulating the adults that she'd forgotten children have excellent memories for inconsistencies. How did Jessica react to that? She got mad. Told Emma she was confused, that she must have misunderstood, but Emma stuck to her story. Smart girl. What else? Linda's been calling around to all the assisted living places in the area, supposedly checking on availability for when you return and are ready to accept help. She's also been talking to people at your church, your book club, anyone who'll listen about her concerns for your mental state. The campaign was intensifying. With their primary target out of reach, Jessica and Linda were working to control the narrative, ensuring that when I returned, I'd find a community convinced I needed intervention. Michael, I need you to do something. Start documenting these conversations. Record them if you can legally do so in Illinois. I want evidence of what they're saying about me. Already on it. I've been keeping a detailed log. Good. How are you holding up? There was a long pause. It's hard, Mom. Living with someone who tried to hurt you, pretending everything's normal. Sometimes I look at Jessica feeding Emma breakfast and I think about what she tried to do to you, and I want to grab Emma and run. Don't do anything dramatic yet. We're building a case, but we need more evidence before we act. What kind of evidence? The kind that proves this was planned, systematic and ongoing. Right now, it's mostly our word against theirs. That evening, Catherine and I sat on her patio drinking wine and watching the sunset paint the desert mountains in shades of rose and gold. My sister was 3 years younger than me, widowed like myself, but she'd chosen to embrace her freedom rather than cling to familiar routines. Phoenix suited her, all that sunshine and possibility. Margaret, tell me again why you can't just call the police and have Jessica arrested for attempted poisoning. Because I have no proof that would hold up in court. The Ativan bottle had a partial label. Any decent lawyer would claim reasonable doubt about what it actually contained. And Jessica would say she was trying to help me with my obvious anxiety. But you have witnesses to her trying to put pills in your wine. I have Michael, who loves his wife and didn't initially believe what he was seeing. I have Emma, who's 8 years old. I have Harold, who wouldn't testify against his own daughter if his life depended on it. And I have Linda, who was actively participating in the scheme. Catherine swirled her wine thoughtfully. So what's your plan? I'm going to give Jessica enough rope to hang herself with. She's desperate now, off balance, making mistakes. When people like that feel cornered, they tend to overreach. Meaning what? Meaning she's going to try something big, something dramatic enough to justify immediate intervention, and when she does, I'll be ready. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Sullivan, this is Dr. Elizabeth Warner from Chicago General Hospital. We have Jessica Sullivan here asking about emergency psychiatric holds for elderly patients. Please call me at your earliest convenience. I showed the text to Catherine, whose eyebrows shot toward her hairline. She's calling hospitals. I called Dr. Warner immediately. She was the chief of psychiatry at Chicago General, and her voice carried the authority of someone who'd seen every type of family manipulation imaginable. Mrs. Sullivan, I felt you should know that your daughter-in-law has been making inquiries about emergency psychiatric holds. She's claiming you've disappeared, maybe experiencing dementia, and could be a danger to yourself. Dr. Warner, I'm visiting my sister in Phoenix. I'm mentally competent, under no duress, and certainly not missing. I suspected as much. Mrs. Sullivan, I see these cases regularly. Adult children or in-laws who want elderly relatives institutionalized for financial gain. Your daughter-in-law was quite insistent about the urgency of your situation. What did you tell her? That emergency holds require direct medical observation and evidence of immediate danger. I also mentioned that making false claims about someone's mental state could constitute harassment or fraud. How did she react? She became quite agitated, started talking about how you'd been refusing help, isolating yourself, showing signs of paranoia. When I asked for specific medical documentation, she said your regular doctor was part of the problem because he wasn't taking your condition seriously. The audacity was breathtaking. Jessica was trying to build a case, not just against me, but against any medical professional who might contradict her narrative. Dr. Warner, if she contacts you again, would you document the conversation? Already am. Mrs. Sullivan, be very careful. Someone this determined usually has backup plans. That night, I lay awake in Catherine's guest room, listening to coyotes howl in the distance and thinking about backup plans. What would Jessica do when the hospital route failed? What other institutions might she approach? What other levers might she try to pull? The answer came at 6 a.m. Phoenix time, 8 a.m. in Chicago. Michael called, his voice tight with panic. "Mom, Jessica's filed a missing person report claiming you have Alzheimer's and might be wandering confused. She told the police you disappeared after becoming increasingly disoriented and paranoid. Even though they already told her, I have the right to travel. She went to a different police station, and she brought Linda with her as a supporting witness." I sat up in bed, fully awake now. "What did they tell the police? That you've been showing signs of dementia for months, that you've been forgetting appointments, calling people by wrong names, seeming confused about basic facts. They said the last time they saw you, you were agitated and talking about people trying to hurt you. Paranoid delusions, classic signs of dementia." "Exactly. And Mom, they provided documentation." "What kind of documentation?" "Photos of you from Thanksgiving dinner that they claim show you looking confused. A timeline of incidents over the past 6 months with dates and witnesses. Even a statement from your neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, saying she was worried about you." My blood ran cold. Dorothy Chen lived 3 houses down, but Mrs. Henderson lived right next door. She was elderly herself, easily confused, and probably susceptible to Jessica's concerned daughter-in-law routine. They built a case file, a comprehensive one. The police are taking it seriously because they have multiple witnesses and detailed documentation. What happens now? They've issued a silver alert. Your photo and description are being circulated to law enforcement agencies across the Midwest. They're treating this as a vulnerable adult case. I felt the walls closing in from 2,000 miles away. A silver alert meant I was officially classified as a missing person with cognitive impairment. Every police officer, every medical professional, every concerned citizen would be looking for Margaret Sullivan, the confused elderly woman who'd wandered away from her family. "Michael, I need you to contact Detective Walsh immediately. Tell her what's happening." "I already did. She's furious. Says this is harassment disguised as concern, but the damage is done. Once a silver alert is issued, it's hard to get it rescinded without making Jessica look justified in her concerns." "Meaning what?" "Meaning if you suddenly appear, acting completely normal and denying any confusion, it could be seen as proof that you're having paranoid delusions about your family trying to harm you." The trap was perfect. If I stayed away, I was a confused elderly woman who'd wandered off and was too disoriented to seek help. If I returned, I was either proving Jessica right about my mental state, or I was displaying the kind of paranoid behavior that suggested serious psychological problems. "There's more, Mom. Jessica's been talking to Emma." "About what?" "About how sometimes older people get sick in their minds and need special doctors to help them. How sometimes grandparents forget things and get scared of people who love them. She's preparing Emma for the possibility that you might need to live somewhere with nurses and doctors. She's conditioning our granddaughter to accept my institutionalization." "Yes. And Mom, Emma's been asking when you're coming home because she misses you. Jessica told her that you might not be able to come home if you're too sick." I closed my eyes, seeing the complete picture now. Jessica had turned my absence into evidence of decline, my family's concern into justification for action, and my granddaughter's love into a weapon against my freedom. But she'd made one crucial error. She'd involved law enforcement without controlling the narrative completely. "Michael, I need you to do exactly what I tell you. Go to Detective Walsh and tell her I'm going to call her directly from Phoenix. I'm going to provide evidence that I'm mentally competent and that this entire missing person report is fraudulent." "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that proves this was all planned in advance. I'm going to show that Jessica knew exactly where I was going and when, which means she knowingly filed a false police report." I spent the morning gathering documentation. Credit card receipts showing I'd purchased my plane ticket a week in advance. Email confirmations for my flights. Call logs showing I'd spoken to Catherine multiple times to arrange my visit. Cell phone records proving I'd been in Phoenix for 6 days, calling Michael daily. Most importantly, I had text messages. On the day I'd left Chicago, Jessica had sent me a message. "Have a wonderful time in Phoenix. Don't worry about anything here. We'll take care of everything." The text was time-stamped and saved on my phone. Jessica had not only known where I was going, she'd wished me well on my trip. Any claim that she thought I was missing or confused was provably false. I called Detective Walsh and walked her through everything. "Mrs. Sullivan, this is filing a false police report, but proving intent is tricky. Jessica's lawyer will claim she became concerned when you didn't return as expected, that your previous trip plans became confused in her memory. Even with her text message wishing me well on the trip, that helps, but she could claim she sent it to humor you, not because she believed you were actually going. The fact remains that you told your family you were visiting your sister, you bought plane tickets, and you've been in regular contact with your son. This was never a missing person situation. So, what happens to the Silver Alert? I'm working on getting it cancelled. But Mrs. Sullivan, you need to understand that when you return to Chicago, Jessica's going to be waiting with her next move. She's invested too much in this scheme to give up now. What do you think she'll try? Something immediate and dramatic. She's painted herself into a corner with this missing person report. If you appear completely lucid and competent, her credibility is shot. So she'll need to create a situation where you seem dangerous or incapacitated. Such as? Staged accident, manufactured medical emergency, or she might try to provoke you into an emotional reaction she can record and present as evidence of instability. I hung up feeling like a general whose enemy had just revealed their battle plan. Jessica was running out of options, which made her more dangerous, but also more predictable. That afternoon, I called Robert Martinez with a proposition. "Robert, what if we turn the tables completely? What if instead of defending against Jessica's accusations, we went on the offensive? What do you have in mind? Fraud charges? Harassment? Filing false police reports? Elder abuse? We have documentation of systematic attempts to have me declared incompetent for financial gain. Margaret, that's a significant escalation. Are you prepared for the fallout? Robert, they tried to drug me. They filed false missing person reports. They've spent months building a case to steal my life savings and have me institutionalized. How much more fallout could there be? Point taken. What's your timeline? I'm coming home tomorrow, and when I do, I want Jessica to discover that the confused old woman she's been hunting has become the prosecutor building a case against her. I'll have the paperwork ready." That evening, I called Michael with my plans. "Mom, are you sure about this? Coming back now, pressing charges. It's going to get ugly fast." "Michael, it's already ugly. The question is whether I'm going to let Jessica control the narrative or whether I'm going to fight for my life. What do you need me to do? Be ready to grab Emma and leave if things get bad. Jessica's going to realize she's cornered, and cornered people do desperate things. You think she'd hurt Emma? I think she'd use Emma as leverage. You can't take my daughter's mother away from her. Emma needs her family intact. Think of what this will do to an innocent child. Jesus, Michael, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because people like Jessica don't stop. If we don't stop her now completely and permanently, she'll just find another way to get what she wants. What if we're wrong? What if she really was just concerned about your health? Then she'll be acquitted at trial, and I'll be the paranoid old woman everyone thought I was. But Michael, look at the evidence, really look at it. Does this look like concern, or does it look like a systematic campaign to steal everything your father worked to leave us?" The silence was long, but when Michael spoke again, his voice was steady. "I'll pick you up at O'Hare tomorrow, and Mom, I'm proud of you. For what? For fighting back, for not letting them win. Then, the next morning, I stood in Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport with a carry-on bag and a folder full of legal documents that would either vindicate me completely or destroy what remained of my family relationships. Either way, the war would soon be over. As my plane lifted off into the desert sunshine, I thought about Jessica sitting in my dining room a week ago, trying to slip pills into my wine while her mother provided covering fire. She'd been so confident, so certain that she was manipulating a helpless victim. She was about to discover that this victim had claws. And more importantly, she was about to learn what happened when you underestimated a woman who'd survived 6 decades in a world that didn't coddle the naive. The plane banked east toward Chicago, toward home, toward the final confrontation that would determine whether I remained Margaret Sullivan, independent woman of means, or became another casualty in Jessica Morrison Sullivan's campaign of financial predation. But as I watched Arizona disappear beneath the clouds, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: absolute confidence that I was going to win. Jessica had played her hand perfectly, but she'd been playing against the wrong opponent. And now it was my turn to show her exactly what kind of player she'd chosen to challenge. The game wasn't over, but the endgame had begun, and I held all the winning cards. Epilogue. 6 months later, I sat in my kitchen on a warm May morning, reading the Chicago Tribune over coffee that no longer tasted like fear, and watching birds build nests in the oak tree Patrick had planted 20 years ago. The house felt like home again, instead of a fortress under siege. Jessica Morrison Sullivan was serving 18 months in minimum security prison for elder abuse, fraud, and filing false police reports. Her mother, Linda, had received 2 years probation and community service, though the judge made it clear that her cooperation in providing evidence against Jessica was the only reason she wasn't sharing a cell with her daughter. The trial had been everything I'd hoped for, and nothing I'd wanted. Watching Jessica's lawyer try to portray her as a concerned daughter-in-law whose good intentions had been misunderstood was almost as painful as watching Michael testify against his wife. But the evidence was overwhelming. The documented timeline of manufactured concerns, the false missing person report, Dorothy Chen's analysis of the Ativan bottle, and most damning of all, the text messages and recorded phone calls that proved Jessica knew exactly where I was while claiming I'd disappeared in a confused state. The judge called it a sophisticated campaign of psychological manipulation designed to gain control over an elderly person's assets through systematic undermining of their competency. In less legal language, Jessica had tried to steal my life savings by convincing everyone I was losing my mind. Michael and Emma lived with me now. The divorce had been brutal. Jessica's parents hired expensive lawyers who painted Michael as a traitor to his family. But in the end, the evidence of what Jessica had attempted was too strong to overcome. Emma, resilient as children often are, had adapted to the new living arrangements with the flexibility that adults rarely possess. She still asked about her mother sometimes, and we answered her questions honestly but gently. The hardest part hadn't been the trial or the media attention or even the lingering whispers from people who wondered if there might have been some truth to Jessica's concerns. The hardest part had been accepting that I'd been targeted not randomly, but specifically, chosen as a victim because I fit a profile that predators like Jessica recognized: widowed, comfortable, isolated, and potentially vulnerable to manipulation. But I'd also learned something valuable about my own strength. When pushed to the wall, when threatened with the loss of everything that mattered, my independence, my home, my relationship with my family, I'd fought back with everything I had. And I'd won. Dr. Hendricks had been right about one thing. Financial elder abuse was unfortunately common, but she'd also been right about something else. The best defense was education, documentation, and the kind of support network that makes isolation impossible. I'd become something of an accidental advocate, speaking at senior centers and community groups about the warning signs of family financial abuse. The stories I heard convinced me that Jessica and Linda weren't aberrations. They were part of a much larger problem that preyed on the assumption that older people were inherently vulnerable. "You were lucky," Detective Walsh had told me after Jessica's sentencing. "Most victims don't recognize what's happening until it's too late. The fact that you spotted the manipulation early and had the resources to fight back probably saved your life. Maybe. Or maybe I'd just been too stubborn to go quietly into whatever institutional sunset Jessica had planned for me." The doorbell rang, interrupting my morning reflections. Through the peephole, I saw a familiar face, Dr. Patricia Hendricks, carrying what appeared to be case files and wearing the expression of someone with a proposition. "Margaret, I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced." "Not at all. Coffee's fresh. I've been thinking about our conversation after the trial," she said, settling into my kitchen chair. "About how you mentioned wanting to help other people recognize these warning signs. I remember. What would you think about working with my office as a consultant? We see cases like yours regularly, but we don't often have victims who are articulate, educated, and willing to share their experiences." I poured coffee for both of us, considering the offer. "What kind of consulting?" "Speaking to families who are dealing with suspicious relatives, training law enforcement to recognize manipulation tactics, maybe even testifying in cases where someone's competency is being challenged inappropriately." The idea had appeal. Jessica had tried to turn my age and widowhood into weapons against me, assuming that being over 60 and alone made me an easy target. If I could help other people recognize and resist similar tactics, maybe some good could come from the whole nightmare. "I'd want to help," I said finally. "But Dr. Hendricks, I need you to understand something. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a survivor, and there's a difference." "What's the difference?" "A victim is someone who has things done to them. A survivor is someone who decides what happens next." She smiled and pulled out a folder thick with case files. "Margaret, I think you're going to be very good at this work." As we spread the documents across my kitchen table, stories of other elderly people targeted by family members, friends and caregivers who saw opportunity in aging, I thought about the strange path that had led me here. Jessica's attempt to destroy my life had ultimately given it new purpose and meaning. Michael came downstairs as Dr. Hendricks was leaving, Emma trailing behind him in pajamas and bedhead, clutching the stuffed elephant that had been her constant companion since the divorce. "What was that about, Mom?" "I think I'm going to become a professional thorn in the side of people who prey on older adults." "That's my mom," Emma announced with 8-year-old certainty. "She's tough." Looking at my granddaughter's confident smile and my son's proud expression, I realized that Jessica's greatest failure hadn't been underestimating me. It had been overestimating her own cleverness. She'd assumed that destroying an elderly woman's credibility would be easy, that families would automatically side with younger voices over older ones. That age equated to helplessness. She'd been wrong about all of it, but mostly, she'd been wrong about me. The phone rang, probably another reporter, wanting to do a follow-up story about the Thanksgiving poisoning case, as the media had dubbed it. I let it go to voicemail. I had work to do, cases to review, and victims to help become survivors. Outside my kitchen window, spring was in full bloom, the world green and growing and full of possibility. At 63, I was starting a new chapter in a story that Jessica Morrison Sullivan had tried to end. The best part? This chapter was going to be entirely my own.